Greetings from the Woodstock Art Gallery. I'm Stephanie Porter, Head of Education.
And I'm Dee Logan, Education Coordinator.
Join us as we tour the current exhibition, Walk On, a Woodstock installation by John McEwen, and meet the artist himself.
Then get a glimpse inside John's studio, where we explore his influences and hear the many stories which shaped him into the artist he is today.
John McEwen has been working out of a blacksmith shop in the small town of Hillsdale, Ontario since 1972, after graduating from the Ontario College of Art. His sculptural work has garnered significant attention, both nationally and internationally, exhibiting widely throughout Canada, Australia, Germany, and England through the 1980s. In 1984, John was commissioned to create the Royal Canadian Air Force Hall of Tribute, located in the National Aviation Museum in Ottawa. Searchlight, Starlight, Spotlight was installed in front of what is now called the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto in 1998. Other notable public art commissions have followed over the last 2 decades. John has continued to alternate his public work with a solo exhibition practice at the Olga Korper Gallery in Toronto. In addition to the Woodstock Art Gallery, his work is represented in major public collections across Canada, including the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa and the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. In 2019, John was awarded Canada's highest honor, the Order of Canada. Now that you know a little bit more about the artist, let's take a look at the exhibition.
Welcome to the Dr. Leonard Reeves Gallery. Here you'll find the solo exhibition Walk On, a Woodstock installation by John McEwen. The exhibition began as a conversation about how sculpture can respond to the surrounding environment. For more than 45 years, John has explored how we interact with the world and how we animate our imagination through sculpture. As a result, this space has been designed for the viewer to actively enter into the life of the artist, an intimate retrospect of John McEwen's career. As you enter the space, you are immediately confronted by this large-scale installation. Acting much like an enlarged album cover, this two-dimensional representation of a bust by French sculptor Auguste Rodin claims much of the space by means of a 30-foot-long steel cable connected to the frame of the work. The path of the cable naturally guides us into the main exhibit space, where assortments of records are installed throughout. The album covers, almost simulating a window into another time, act as a homage to the music that influenced John during his formative years of his career, from 1960 to 1969. As we travel farther into the space, it's hard to miss the magnificence that is the life-size Clydesdale horse. The horse represents yet another nostalgic and significant period in John's life, when he lived and worked on a farm during his final year in art school. Upon closer observation, you'll notice the piece is in fact hollow. The body is constructed out of hundreds of metal stars which have been welded together to form the shape of a horse, eloquently suggesting that we're all just made out of stardust and time. The sheer scale of the horse is balanced by smaller sculptural works, which further reinforce John's true love for nature and animals. These works also demonstrate his fondness for shape, form, and pattern. If you'd like to take a closer look, the entire Walk On, a Woodstock installation by John McEwen exhibit will be available to explore virtually on woodstockartgallery.ca. Now that we've experienced the work, let's meet the artist himself.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspires you. Have you always been interested in becoming a sculptor and installation artist and working with metals?
Well, I always wanted to be an artist, but unfortunately I never grew up with a pencil in my hand. The one outlet I had for my imagination was stuff, putting stuff together, and in some ways that's the link to becoming a sculptor, because I wasn't interested in just drawing things out of my imagination, but about connecting different parts of the world with other parts of the world.
Why did you use the metal stars to build life-size creatures such as the horse?
When it comes down to stars, we have a very interesting relationship to the sky and stars in the sky. And I had this one imagination that what if all the stars fell to Earth, and what would they want to do if they could choose to do something? And my sense was that they would choose to be something, to join together and become something awesome, and which of course is where you get the giant workhorse from.
As an artist, what have you learned yourself about others and your community?
I think the most important thing about art is that it gives you a little bit of leeway, a little bit of wiggle room in the fact that imagination can draw upon all kinds of things. Art has a foot in two worlds. One is it has a foot in the world of language, but it also has a little bit of room because it's just completely visual. And in some ways, that's the very same reason that I think animals are useful. Animals have that little bit of room about thinking through your relationships without getting caught up in the psychology necessarily of your time.
If anyone wants to be an artist or a sculptor or try some installation, what would your advice be to them?
Any environment, any place in your house, any place in your backyard, the place you live in can be a source of imagination. I think probably the most interesting dilemma that most artists will face is that you want to think through the places that your imagination can take you, and then at the same time or subsequently you want to think through how you will put that imagination into practice. So that's the odd dilemma about art, is that it's, on one hand it doesn't do something, on the other hand it can do everything.
We're here on location in Hillsdale, Ontario at John McEwen's studio. As we've learned, John began his artistic journey as a child, collecting junk and other objects and transforming them into sculptures. This childhood hobby of collecting, reusing, and repurposing has evolved into a lifelong passion that has profoundly informed John's creative process and professional artistic practice. So John, do you mind taking us for a tour?
Yes. Well, let's start with the horses. One of the things that happens when you look at animals is that you notice that each of them has some very interesting, or each type of animal has a very interesting way of communicating. Horses do all kinds of things with their ears. So when I was looking at this horse head, I decided that I would make the ears special and I would make them out of bronze. So that's what you see here with them being modeled as like a real ear. One of the most interesting things of making animals out of stars is that you have this full body of stars, but then the question is, how do you draw upon something that's very interesting about that animal? Well, deer, especially the male deer, have antlers that fall off every year. So and each year they grow back larger. So unlike the horse where I outline the ear, in this case I looked at what happens when you make some really interesting antlers. So this is a small bucket of stars that has been produced that at some point will be put together into an animal probably. And all the stars are about, they're a little over an inch in size. And when you're making something that is both, that is a sculpture, and you don't want it simply to fall apart, those stars are very tough. If you drop them, if you make a form out of them and drop them, they might dent, but they don't break apart. So then in a practical terms, what's interesting, since you're making a sculpture that you want to suggest a certain fragility to, you want to suggest a certain porosity, a certain openness, the air can flow through them, the water can flow through them, your imagination can flow through them. You know, many cultures think that the stars in the sky were once something that was alive, either their ancestors or
animals or life, essentially. So all the animals and all of us are the product of that long, long journey.